Welcome to Before They Change the World, where we explore the minds, ideas, and dreams of exceptional students working on inspiring projects before they change the world. This episode is hosted by me, David, and I speak with Max, who at the time of recording was a few days away from graduating from his Masters of Robotics at ETH Zurich and starting a full-time job at Zipline in San Francisco. He's a good friend of mine as we both studied aerospace engineering for our bachelor's at TU Delft and then transitioned to robotics at ETH. This episode was recorded at the end of our year as roommates, and we have one last interesting conversation about everything from his experience in elite sport to his recent white paper about global incentive structures, as well as Zipline. I hope you enjoy. Just looking at your website, there's projects in many different fields, and it really looks very impressive that you've done all of this next to your studies. Is all of this independent, or is a majority of it also based on courses that you've taken at university?
Most of it is sort of individual projects that I had in mind, and I wanted to prove to myself that I could do that. So I had an idea in mind, and I was like, oh, it would be really cool if I put this into practice. Yeah. So especially the things that you see that are related to aerospace, those are things that I learned at uni, and then I came back to home and I said, I really want to have a program that solves this equation or that does this orbital propagation from orbital mechanics thing. Right. Or you see there the robot that solves the Rubik's Cube. At some point I was passionate about the Rubik's Cube and I wanted to program a robot that could solve it. And a lot of optimization problems just because I'm passionate about optimization.
And one thing I can notice here as well is that you really enjoy visualizing things. So all of these projects have some kind of visual that complements them, which really makes it a very nice looking website. But I guess it also has many other benefits for you.
Yeah, definitely. For me, the visualization aspect is very, very important. Not only for the final outcome, but for the development process. Because well, first of all, I make a lot of mistakes, and visualizing something is one of the best forms of validation, to see that the thing that you're intending to program actually works. Yeah. And I've always put a lot of effort in the visualization aspects because in the long run it pays dividends. In the long run it makes you understand everything much better, and it's also very appealing, to see a robot in 3D that it's moving its arms, or the picture of planets orbiting the solar system, or this kind of things.
Yeah. How did you go from writing your first lines of code to all the projects that I see on your portfolio website? How was that evolution?
It was, I would say, almost 100% self-taught. I consider myself so lucky to have been born in the YouTube revolution per se. Now it's not only YouTube, but online learning revolution. At first it was maybe the first few steps my father was involved, but after that I discovered how to learn for myself, and it was mostly on YouTube videos. First it was on how to create small HTML websites, and then I got into a bit of game development, and all through YouTube. And after that, when I started uni, I transitioned to more sort of official courses, like not individual YouTube videos, but more like MIT OpenCourseware, right? Yeah. It's I forgot the name, but I don't know why, because it's like my uni, I've learned so much more in OpenCourseware than anywhere else, including my university in Delft.
I've heard some stories from mutual friends that apparently when you were young, when you were in high school in your little village in Spain, you were seen as a rising star, but it wasn't for programming, it was more for swimming. It's completely different. So can you explain what?
Yeah, it wasn't actually swimming, it was Finswimming, which is a minority sport. It's swimming but with fins. And in my town we had a club for Finswimming, and I was very passionate about it. During a few years I took it to the next level, where I was training 6 days a week, 2 times a day. And I almost had like a personal coach. We shared it with my other, like the other teammate that was very competitive. And I was really driven by it. You know, it at some point my dream was to become a professional fin swimmer. So
okay, that's what you saw yourself doing full time.
Not full time, but it was always like something that I would have been very proud to do.
Okay.
Until at some point I was too passionate about programming that it sounds sort of balanced it.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay, so wait, when did that balance tip towards the programming side?
In the last years of high school, when I really got into more involved programming projects, and I wanted to exploit more like my analytical skills.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you started thinking about university, I guess, a bit, and maybe seeing your life in that direction too.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Well, we'll come back to that. But first of all, I want to ask, what was fueling you? Because you were probably training many days a week, very difficult trainings. Like there's probably a lot of physical pain involved to get to this level. You must have a fire inside you, and I really wonder where that comes from.
Yeah. To be quite frank, I didn't really enjoy the training aspect of it. You know, like to be almost about to vomit, or this is not appealing. But there's so many fulfilling aspects of it. Especially, being part of a team and traveling with the national team and, going to see other countries in the world. For me, it was my way of visiting different countries,
Mm-hmm.
It was the way I would do tourism. And also to prove myself that I could, improve over time. And also, I was very lucky that I had a teammate that was also very competitive.
Mm-hmm.
So we constantly pushed each other, and that was... I wanted to beat him and he wanted to beat me, of course, in a very healthy way.
Mm-hmm.
But that also fueled me, knowing that I wanted to be better than myself and also better than him.
Okay. So by better, in this case,
faster.
You're talking about a specific distance that you both did?
We actually had divergent paths. So within Finswimming, you had swimming with one fin, which is like the normal mode actually, and then you have swimming with two fins. And I was more one fin and he was two fins. But still, I wanted to be better at my thing that he was at his thing, and the opposite is also true. Again, in a very healthy way. I'm super proud that we managed to keep this very healthy. We were best friends, so literally best friends. So yeah.
Okay, and so I mean I can relate to doing some sports and getting obsessed by them, and to me the fact that it's measurable makes it addicting in a way, like almost like a video game, right? So in my first year of university, I went into competitive rowing, and there every stroke, literally, you're looking at a screen the whole time. You're looking at how much power you're pulling every single second. So I guess for you, it was maybe also important to get that quick feedback. Yeah,
it's very nice to look at it that way. Now that I think it really looked like a video game. I want to keep improving. So I also took it very technical. I had like an Excel sheet with all my progression of the times for all of my distances, and I remember I would set sort of goals that I wanted to achieve, and I tried to extrapolate. Considering my current progress, where am I gonna reach in 3 months? Wow. So I took it very
obsession level.
And that, to be honest, that was also that also helped me understand a little bit the power of programming, because I was using, for example, I wrote like a PHP program to calculate, what's gonna be my time in a few months if I keep improving this way. So it wasn't only Excel. And I would generate like diagrams with like the goals and the progression and everything. So I always took it very, analytically.
Nice. So how has your relationship with sport changed since that competitive period?
Yeah, so I peaked just right before finishing high school, and after that there was downhill, definitely. Because I tried to continue to swim in the Netherlands when I started my bachelor's, but there I didn't find a club because they weren't doing Finswimming, which still was okay. I would have handled normal swimming, but the team was only Dutch speaking, so it was a bit difficult to integrate.
Right. Okay.
And then I kept, doing sports, but only at amateur level, and not even that only,
So for you, was it very was that decision very hard of having to leave Spain in favor of, your studies versus continuing with professional sport in Spain plus doing your studies there? Was there a period where maybe you got disillusioned with your sport and then you thought, yeah, no, I'm just going to prioritize my studies. This is not realistic? Or
at the time that I was finishing high school, I already made my mind that I wanted to pursue, the more academic environment rather than athletic one. But it was never a hard decision. Like when I was younger, I wanted to be, a professional Finswimmer or in general athlete. But as I started going through the later years of high school, I already knew that I was passionate about programming and in general engineering and science, and I wanted to exploit that further. And it wasn't a difficult decision for me. I really wanted to go abroad, so I really liked my friends at the time and how everything was my life in Spain. But still, I was looking forward to go abroad, so I wouldn't say it was a difficult decision.
So I'm just taking a wild guess here, but was this desire to go abroad sparked by the international competitions that you attended, or was there another reason that you had this interest?
That as well, but it was mostly that I felt that I wanted to push myself out of my comfort zone. I wanted to do something different, like game changing, I really wanted to find my limits, not this time in the athletic domain, but in the more scientific domain. So I really wanted to push myself in that sense and, go to a different country where you don't know other people and, start your life from scratch. I was excited about that.
Wow. It just seems like, given, the small town that you came from, we have actually very similar stories. Like, not a lot of people around us were doing the same thing. But I have my parents. Like, my parents both studied abroad. And we come from a quite international family, but in your case, it's like really grounded in Spain, right?
Well, my mother is from Belgium, but still she's from Belgium, but then she moved to Spain, but she's not international. She was born and raised in Belgium from like a old-time Flemish family, and my father the same, but in Spain. So I was, the first to go abroad and then also transition to other countries after the Netherlands.
And
my parents didn't have a higher education, so it was also the first of the family.
Wow. And how much did you consider that, like going abroad to a university like Delft versus university like UPC in Barcelona?
I had plan A and plan B, and plan A was Delft and plan B was Universidad de Barcelona. So I didn't have even more options. I just found out about this uni in the Netherlands that apparently was pretty good, and I really liked. At the time, Aerospace sounded like something I wanted to learn more because I couldn't find it on YouTube. So it wasn't like programming, which I could find on YouTube. Those were my two options, and I really wanted to go on to Delft, but my plan B, I was still happy about it.
So how did you change during your time in Delft? Do you remember feeling a transformation inside of you? Did that experience bring to surface some things about yourself that you didn't know, like some strengths or weaknesses?
Definitely, I struggled a little bit in the beginning because my English at the time was very weak. So I mostly made Spanish friends or Spanish-speaking friends, or the ones that were not Spanish-speaking. I had very superficial conversations with them. But I noticed that I really changed as a person, not so much because I became independent, which I sort of was already before going to the Netherlands, but more because, I was in a different country that I knew nothing about, and I was surrounded by people that were in the same spot. I got a lot of inspiration from my friends. My friends in the Netherlands were awesome, and we went through the journey together. And I mean, you can imagine I was born and raised in a small town. A lot of things that that I was looking back, I was very innocent about, and those years were to grow not only as a professional but also as a person,
Mm-hmm. Mm. Okay, so then, you're kind of painting a very positive experience in Delft, especially with the friends you had made there. But eventually, after your 3 years, right, of bachelor, you decided to make a switch again in your life in terms of location and also actually the field of study.
Mm-hmm.
So you came to ETH to do robotics for your masters, and I'm wondering, when did that decision start as a seed in your brain? When did you first find out about ETH and about the robotics program here?
So already before starting my bachelor's on aerospace, I knew that I was into programming. So I still chose aerospace because at the time I felt like I could really learn anything online when it comes to programming, whereas for aerospace that wasn't true. But after a few years of aerospace, even though I really enjoyed aerospace and like as a science it's super interesting, I could notice that maybe if I want to specialize in something, that has to be more programming. And I say programming in general, but at the time I started learning a lot on AI, not so much on robotics, but the software side. So I learned a lot of courses on AI, and then I did a minor in Singapore also on AI and mathematics. And at the time it became clear that I wanted to switch from aerospace to more software-oriented career. And robotics, systems and control at ETH looked like the perfect solution for that. Again, not because I wanted to leave the Netherlands, but because I wanted to push myself out of my comfort zone. Yeah. So that was the decision behind it.
Okay. Yeah, I honestly think the minor of the Delft Aerospace Bachelor is such a great initiative.
It is,
because there's so many people that decide to then change their major based on that minor, myself included. I had basically the same waking up moment during my minor of, wow, software engineering is really cool. Artificial intelligence, robotics.
And not only for realizing what you like, but also for, it's very appealing for like mentally to learn about something different. You have to imagine you've been 2.5 years or 2 years learning about the same things, and you've been exploiting a lot. You've been digging very deep into, in our case, aerospace, and it feels so satisfying to learn a lot. Not diving a lot, but broad exploration on a new topic is like, wow, now I'm to this new world. And look at this is amazing.
Exactly, because if you read a paper or you go to a lecture, suddenly 80% of the material is new versus if you're in aerospace, you've heard so many things are basically repeated between courses, or I don't know. It's the steep learning curve kind of drops off a bit.
I know that if it wasn't because I want to prepare myself as a professional and I want to specialize, I know that I would spend all my time learning about different things. I wouldn't. Okay, maybe some things I would like to dive a little bit more, but in general I would just like to learn about humanities and then engineering and then this physics degree and just switching constantly.
What would have been your alternative for the masters actually? When you were thinking of applying?
So I applied to MIT, Oxford, I think. Yeah, Oxford and ETH. But it was the three tracks were the same, were robotics, and maybe MIT or Oxford were not exactly robotics, but the software side, so more like optimization and AI.
But they're also all very hard. Assume that you're gonna.
I got rejected both of MIT and Oxford, but luckily I got into ETH, so I'm still happy about it.
Otherwise, you would have stayed in Delft.
My last plan was to stay in Delft, and we still have been happy. Glad that I made it to ETH, but still.
So you've told me in the past in our conversations that you can see yourself living in Zurich. In some hypothetical future. Why is that? Why do you like this place?
Why wouldn't I like it? It's an amazing place. It depends, of course, on your preferences, and there's no such thing as a perfect city, of course. For example, for me, in winter it gets too cold and too dark, maybe, even though it's not as bad as in the Netherlands. But I find it, the standard of living here is very high. There are a lot of professional opportunities, and most importantly, you're surrounded by people that, at least on a personal level, inspire me. So I want to be surrounded by this kind of people. At least I'm talking about myself, of course. And in Switzerland, I mean, I really like the country because you're surrounded by nature. And there are a lot of things that I like here. But having said that, even though I like Zurich, I'm always, open to, again, push myself out of my comfort zone and go to a next city. Again, I don't think there's such a thing like a perfect city. It's rather, that what you gain is not on the goodness of a city, but rather what you learn of it, and you learn more if you switch more often. I imagine.
Right. Also, the fact that we're limited by our sample size. So you can only compare with what you've seen.
Exactly.
And
and
you don't know what's out there. The exploitation.
And there are so many things that I miss in the Netherlands. The going by bike everywhere. Or the culture in so many aspects. And in Spain, the weather, the social life, the environment that you have there. There's things to enjoy everywhere. So I wouldn't put any city on top of any other.
So, speaking about new adventures, I want to switch to talk about a company you've been involved with and you're going to continue to be involved with, and is going to be your next adventure, and is going to actually drive you away from Zurich for a while.
Pretty far.
And that is the company called Zipline.
Yes.
So how did you first hear about it, and what made you apply?
Yeah, it's a bit of a long story, but I remember, I think it was during my first year in Aerospace, and I was checking YouTube videos from a channel, it's called Real Engineering, and I learned about this company that was using drones to deliver medical supplies in Africa, and they were delivering especially medical supplies, and especially blood bags. So, for example, you can imagine when a mother is giving birth, then they send a drone with a bag of blood to the place where the person is. She will normally be in a hospital, but the problem is that in there the hospitals don't have a supply of blood because blood has a very short expiration date. So if they would keep their own supply, it would expire very often. So what they do is they centralize the supply of blood, and then they deliver from there to the hospitals in which they are needed. So when I learned about that, I was mind blown, because it was the dream company for me, because on the one side, it was very challenging from an engineering standpoint. But on the other side, for me, it was very fulfilling, to be part of a project that could do that. And I remember as soon as I watched the video, first thing is I sent it to my best friend, and he also was like mind blown. And then the second thing we did was to apply, and we both got rejected because, of course, we were on the first year of our bachelor's with no experience at all. But yeah, long story, like feed forward 3 years, and I did an internship there. And I really liked the experience there. I was very happy with with the company, with the culture of the company, with the team, and I'm very excited.
They were happy with you,
and they were happy with me. So we made it long term. We made it official. Now after I finish my master's degree, which is soon to be finished, I will fly to San Francisco. I didn't mention, so the company is in San Francisco, even though they operate in Africa. And it's going to be my first full-time job. So
right. So your master thesis is about to finish, like literally
next week.
Almost finished next week. And next month, at the start of September-ish, you're gonna
start of October.
You're gonna go first to Africa, right?
Yeah, actually. So they have this very cool program that for new employees, if you want, they let you go to Africa, to Rwanda and to Ghana, which are the two countries in which their operations are largest. And they have this program called Zipline Academy, and that you can learn about how operations work. So this is very useful for you to understand how can you improve the life of the operators as an engineer in Silicon Valley, you know, in your office, that you have no context on what's going on. So
you can't empathize with them.
Exactly, and it's not only a matter of practicality, but also a matter of, you know, you want to get in touch with your customers. You know, you want to know why are you developing this thing, and also it's probably to have conversations not only with the operators of the drone, but with the end customers, which are the doctors and the patients. So that to me is a very important part of the picture.
Yeah. Because so far you have not interacted even through a call with the people in Uganda, or
during my interview process I had like a call with a few, but not I've never gone to Africa. So
okay. But during your internship you didn't have to correspond with people on site there?
Yeah, of course, but it was always as a, like, from a professional standpoint, and always because we had something to discuss. So for example, on every Mondays we have the all hands meeting, and most of the times it's discussing some operations that is going on, and you get to learn about, you know, what are the issues they are facing, and most of it is centered in Africa, so I get to learn a lot. But this is not comparable to, you know, me going to Africa and actually seeing the drones fly and talking to the operators and understanding, you know, how it's making an impact not only in the patients but even the communities there. And, you know, also think that they're employing a lot of locals there, so, you know, it's not only the product being delivered, but a company based there that it's making a lot of impact.
Right. Yeah, both providing value to normal people, but also to people that want a job.
Exactly. Yeah.
Amazing. So going back just to your application story. So you first applied, got rejected, then you applied again, like what, 3 years
later? Yeah.
Okay, so basically all the experience you gained during your aerospace bachelor was what made the difference, you would say, right?
Yes, I guess so. And also, I mean, probably at the time they not only I didn't have the experience, but maybe they were not looking for, like, the stars have to align. Maybe this time I was very lucky also that they were looking for exactly this position.
Right. What was the position?
Actually, so I applied for embedding engineer, embedded software. Yeah.
Wow.
And at the time I thought I would like it, but then during the interview it was clear that wouldn't have been a good fit. Both ways.
What did you know about embedded?
Pretty much nothing, but I mean, I was so passionate about the company that I still wanted to apply, and it was the only opening in the website. That's why I did that. But I had an interview with a person, and we both figured out that it would be better to transfer to another team, which is called behaviors, but it's basically like automation team. And then they switched me to this other team, and I had the whole interview process in the other team.
But that other team didn't have a vacancy, or did they?
Well, they didn't have an opening in the website, but I guess they were still open to hire. I mean, I would say most companies, what they want is to acquire talent. You know, they don't. I mean, they have these openings online because sometimes they really want a position, but for the rest of time maybe they don't want to hire. But if the opportunity presents itself, then
I see.
I'm not an expert on that.
Right. Yeah. And when you joined them, how big was the company, and how big is it now?
That's a good question. It grew a lot. I mean, I joined there last summer, and now this summer, I don't know the numbers, but at the time it was 600 employees in total, considering, you know, the operators in Africa, go-to-market, HR, the engineers in San Francisco. The whole team was around 600. I don't know what it is now, but it's probably very close to 1,000, if not more. And when it comes to engineer as well, I think it has doubled or so. So at the time it was not like close to 200, and now it must be much more than that.
And another question about when you applied, did you at that point know that it was going to be a remote internship or not?
So at the time I thought it was going to be an on-site internship. Okay. I had a few negative experiences where I got almost the role that I was looking for, but then because it was during COVID, so all visas were cancelled, sort of my internship was also cancelled. But I was very lucky that Zipline didn't do that to me. So they said, look, we cannot fly you there because visas are cancelled, but at least we're going to allow you to do the online internship. And of course, I also had to accept the terms, but I was I'm gonna take it.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, better than nothing, but it would have been even better to visit the team there. Even though I had the chance to visit them in January this year.
Right. Yes. And what were the best and worst things, would you say, about the remote side of the internship?
The worst thing is that you're a bit more distant from everything, you know, like you're in a different time zone, and you sort of want to be independent because you don't want to work in their same time zone. You don't want to go to bed at 2 a.m., you know. So I want to work in my time zone, but I was still considering this. I was still very lucky that I felt part of my team, and you know, it wasn't the worst, but the time zone is a struggle. So it's definitely worse than working online for a company that is in the same time zone. Like the time zone component really makes it more difficult.
Okay. How long was your internship, and what kind of projects did you work on during that time?
So my internship was, I would say, 5 months or so.
Okay.
But after that, they offered me the position that I ended up taking now, but before finishing my master's degree. And I didn't take it because I wanted to actually finish my master's degree, but I continued to work part-time as a contractor. And so I did the internship from May to, I think it was September or so. And then after that, part-time until I started my master's thesis.
Okay.
And then I'm going to work full-time from October onwards.
Okay.
And the projects that I got involved, I cannot talk a lot about, you know, the nature of the projects, but what I can say is that I was in the behaviors team, which is the automation. So you can think that I was working on algorithms to avoid two drones conflicting into each other. So it's mostly working on automation software that allows for traffic decongestion. So not even avoiding vehicles, but making sure that we don't run into a situation in which there are a lot of vehicles together. So it's not only vehicle to vehicle deconfliction, but actually maintaining like a healthy network of drones that are in the sky.
Okay, so spread out density.
Yeah, density, but also aligning the drones, you know, so yeah.
Okay, cool. Obviously, during your internship, you made a good impression because they extended your contract. So I'm kind of wondering, what do you think made you stick out?
I guess I was lucky that they handed me a project that I was very passionate about. So the one word is passion. You know, when you're passionate about something, you just not only you work better and more, but you're also more creative. You really have ownership of your project.
Okay.
So I guess what they liked is that I really excelled at the project that I was given. Of course, there were a lot of things that I didn't do perfectly or that didn't end up working well. The part that I liked is that it was a from scratch project that actually had a lot of impact on the later stages of the development of the project that other engineers are working on now. So it was like a big project maybe not a big project, but a project to start from scratch that will later influence the development of the drone. The project in specific was, again, I cannot talk about the details, but a simulation project. So I designed a simulation where you could visualize the trajectories of a lot of drones and implemented algorithms for them to deviate.
Going towards the end of this part-time work, did you expect that you were gonna get job offer? I don't know, did you get any clues from your supervisor that they were like, you're performing really well?
Maybe I got a few clues, but I tried not to think too much about it.
Okay.
It caught me by surprise one day. It was one of the happiest days because the nothing less than the CTO of Zipline actually, I was actually working with the CTO of Zipline, which is an amazing engineer. You're a user of Ruts. He was one of the creators of Ruts. So I felt one of the gifts of my internship was that I got to have a few meetings with him. And he was the one, I had a meeting with my supervisor and the CTO, and they sort of offered me the role. So I was like, wow, this is super cool. Right. And, the only pity is that what they offered me was a full-time position, but right away, and I didn't want to take that because I was in the middle of my master's degree. So I first wanted to finish my master's degree. Okay. But I wouldn't say it's uncommon. I think companies want to have interns because it's a way for them to actually understand,
it's a probation.
Exactly, yeah. It's like a very long interview process. So, and it's I'm definitely not an outlier. I would say that a lot of people do the same thing. So yeah.
Okay, so the contract now is for at least 1 year or for?
And so it's complicated because I'm gonna be I'm gonna have to move to the US. So if the contract is limited by something, it's especially visas. But for now it's full time.
So Zipline, as far as I understand, started as this emergency healthcare delivery company,
logistics
right? Logistics for emergency situations in remote places like Uganda. But I've seen on the website that now they're moving into the US market, not only for healthcare but also for retail. So has this been in the works for a while already internally, and how separate are these two applications on a technical level? Like, are you working in different teams? Are you sharing the software stack for most of it? How?
There are different approaches. So Zipline is expanding, and one of the ways it's expanding is by sort of applying the same approach that is doing in Africa but in other parts of the world. And then you also have the Powered by Zipline approach, which is that they actually sell the drone to, for example, another company that then can use it for their own purposes. That is sort of like an exploration that they are doing, but it's not like a big part of Zipline yet, the Powered by Zipline. But I wouldn't say you have the team split in two. I think most of the processes are the same, especially when it comes to the drone. So the drone it serves the same purpose, delivering one thing than another. But what is very important about this is to evaluate it in terms of the mission. It's something that I've been meditating a lot, because what drove me to Zipline was the humanitarian aspect of it, that it's delivering medical supplies. So them expanding to other markets is something that I've had to think about, because even though they're gonna keep increasing the number of medical supplies and emergency medical supplies, they're gonna do other things that make it maybe they make me feel that the essence is not anymore medical supplies. But they've been putting a lot of effort into making sure that the mission is still the same. So the reason why they're expanding is of course because of unit economics. You cannot if you're not profitable in the long run, you cannot keep doing these medical deliveries, which is not that they are not profitable, but in order to drive down the cost, you have to scale up. And the only way to scale up is to grow in space, but also in the use cases of your product. So there's no other way to improving unit economics and scaling up to actually benefit the end customers. So this is a thing that I have to reason about, but in reality it really makes sense. It's something that it's aligned with the mission. It's for improving the mission.
I was wondering to what degree the Zipline system is automated and how much human manual labor is required to have it running, and where you see improvement.
So there are a lot of areas to improve. Maybe in automation we can be very proud of where we are, because from the moment that the drone takes off to the moment that it's hooked up on the air. Cool. I encourage people to watch how the drone lands.
I don't know if there's something on the website. But do you think there is on the main page?
They changed the website recently, so.
Is this it? No. Okay. Well, I can't find it. But maybe you can describe it with words.
Yeah. So for the drone to take off, it's really interesting because normally the drone, by the way, looks like a tiny airplane, so it has fixed wings. And normally airplanes have a runway to take off, but that would require to actually build a runway, and we don't want to do that in every center at which we operate, of course. So what we do is we have a ramp that is at an angle, and then it's sort of a catapult. So the drone just launches and gains speed on the ramp, and then it's let free. So that's how the drone takes off. And then to deliver the package, instead of the drone or the tiny airplane, if you want to call it, actually landing and then delivering the package, what it does is that it deploys a parachute that contains the payload. And because they are light payloads, it's still fine to be handled by a parachute. And it's a paper parachute, by the way.
Okay.
And then for the drone to land, instead of landing, which again you would need a runway, what the engineers designed, this was way before I joined the team. It's one of the things that caught my attention, is that so while the drone is flying, it sort of has like a hook on the tail, and then they deploy a string that sort of picks up the drone in the sky while it's flying, and these. And the string is elastic, so it allows for like a slow deceleration, and then it falls. Well, it doesn't fall, but it hangs from the sky, and then the operators remove it from the hook and then onto the next drone.
So the operators are basically in charge of picking the right payload, putting it on the drone on that launcher thing, and then picking up the drone from the hook.
Exactly. I mean, there's so much more to the process that I still have to figure out when I go to Africa. That's the main purpose. And of course, there are also operators they are not literally driving the drones or operating them, but they can give high-level commands, like, for example, return to the nest, which is the center where they launch, or these kind of commands.
Okay, so I guess the dream is to miniaturize this as much as I don't know if that would be possible, but given that you have a pretty compact launching and landing system, you would basically almost be able to have like remote stations where there's almost no human operator, right? And that way you can have units almost anywhere in these remote places. But I don't know if that's feasible given that the payload needs to be stored.
I don't think I'm qualified to answer the question, because again, I have to learn so much about the operations side of it that I don't know. I don't even know what's the direction that they're trying to head. I wish I knew.
Okay, but super interesting. It's so cool. Okay, so now I want to turn to something completely different, super unrelated to Zipline, but it's very related to your mind and where your mind wanders. And that is a project that you worked on for a few months and not so long ago, called Nash Judge, which I believe you coined that term, right?
I think so. I mean, Nash is a personal name,
and Judge as well, but you put them together. And you basically developed an idea for it's a new incentive structure to promote global cooperation, right? And you developed this idea by means of a white paper and a very, very beautiful YouTube video with
I put a lot of
amazing animations that make the idea really, really clear. So I'll have links to that in the show notes.
Thank you.
For anyone that's interested, I would really recommend looking into it. But maybe we can hear from the man himself about what this is all about. So maybe I first introduce what the problem is, and then the solution that I propose to the problem. So what's the problem? The problem is that in the status quo, the world is structured in nations. And nations are trying to maximize their own individual utility, and to a certain extent disregarding the utility of other nations. And this system is what we call nationalism. This is the system in which the world is structured. And I'm not here to criticize the system. It has some advantages that, for example, the competition between nations, in a way, one aspect of it is healthy because it encourages innovation. It's a competition that acts as an optimization mechanism. But it has a lot of negative aspects as well. And mainly the main negative aspect is that it's an incomplete system because it's not designed to solve global problems. It's very well designed to solve national problems, but not so much global problems. And you can think of global problems as problems that require cooperation between nations. So one example can be climate change. Another example can be, incentivizing peace, so preventing conflict between nations in the form of violence or in the form of economic conflicts. Or you can think, if you're not interested in any of these, you can think of, for example, how should governments or nations cooperate
to promote legislation to prevent harmful technology to harm us in the future. These global regulations, there are things that we should be regulating on a global basis because of the same problem that I will comment now. So why are these problems not solved by nationalism? The reason is that from a game theory perspective, even though I will try to describe it with normal words, you can think that a global problem cannot be solved by nationalism, because if a nation or a government is trying to, for example, maximize its own utility, for example, when it comes to climate change, most of the times in the short term, the rational decision, rational being improve your own utility, for example, when it comes to climate change, is to actually not fight against climate change. Why? Because if you fight against climate change and the other countries, or if you don't have the trust that the other countries will do the same, then you end up being the only one that invested a lot of effort into fighting against climate change, but the other countries didn't do the same. And because of that inability of governments to cooperate, then these problems are very difficult. I'm not saying that they're unsolvable, but they're definitely much more difficult to solve under nationalism. So there have been a few solutions proposed in the past, the main one being one defended by a lot of intellectuals, which is to have some sort of central world government, and people think that it would be like a authoritarian government with a lot of power over a lot of things. But the idea would be that this central government would be sort of in charge of managing only global problems, climate change, these kind of problems. And then what this world government would be doing would be to impose an incentive structure on governments to cooperate. And this translates to rewarding them if they are being cooperative and sanction them if they are being defective. If they are not fighting against climate change, then they receive a sanction. And this incentive structure is everything maybe not everything, but it's really what you need. You need countries to be incentivized to cooperate, because if they are incentivized to cooperate, then the rational action or decision to make is the one that is actually aligned with the global, with the common good, with the good for the rest of the world. So what you need is an incentive structure. Now, the solution that I propose is different than the central world government in a lot of aspects, but the main reason why it's different is because instead of being a top-down approach, instead of relying on a central government, it relies on a bottom-up approach. Why is this better? It's better because a top-down approach is really unattainable, because all governments in the world would have to agree to be ruled by a superior government. They would have to agree on what is the sanctions and rewards that they receive, by which channels are they imposed, on what basis are they imposed, and a lot of things that we don't see happening in the near future. So even though it could be a potential solution, it's unattainable. What I'm proposing is a bottom-up incentive structure. And the way this works is the following. So what I propose is to use blockchain technology to create tokens that are specific for every government. So let's create this hypothetical world where we only have two governments. We have country A, or government A, and government B. So then we also have token A and token B, or B tokens and A tokens. And then you have smart contracts, which are just programs that run on a blockchain, that what they do is they control the supply of tokens so that they can influence the price of them. And these programs, what they do is that they make the price of the tokens be correlated with their ability to cooperate. So for example, if the A government is more cooperative, then the price of the A token will be higher. And if the A government is defective, then the price of the A token will be lower. And the same for government B. And then if you
like this price you control by the scarcity or amount.
Exactly, by the supply, which is the scarcity of it. So more supply is lower price, fewer supply is higher price. I mean, I explained this in the video, of course, with a bit more detail, and in the paper as well. But the idea is that you have these smart contracts that correlate the price of a token with the ability of its corresponding country to cooperate. And then the second property is that you want to give tokens at least to a high proportion to their corresponding governments. So you want that government A has a lot of A tokens, and you want that government B has a lot of B tokens. And if these two properties are met, then something magical occurs, which is that we have an incentive structure. Why? because if country A has a lot of A tokens, it wants the value of A tokens to increase because they're going to become richer. And what do you have to do for the value of these tokens to increase? Well, you have to cooperate. You have to demonstrate your ability to cooperate because the price of these tokens is correlated with your ability to cooperate. So country A is going to be incentivized to cooperate because in this way, the price of these tokens will be higher, and is de-incentivized to defect because if they do that, the price of these tokens will be lower. And the same applies for country B. There's a third property that it's that even though there's correlation, you also need the magnitude of these tokens to be high, because of course, if these tokens are worth $10, then the countries don't really mind about so something as small as this. But if these three properties exist, then something really interesting occurs, and I will explain it first in game theory terms and then in normal words, which is that the effect of this is that you apply an offset in the matrix payout of individual governments in a way that aligns the Nash equilibrium with the common good. And what this means in normal words is that after that, the rational decision for every government is actually the one that is best for the rest of the world. So that's what you need to solve a global problem. So yeah, that's how I would briefly describe
Well,
I know a lot to unpack.
That was a long monologue.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
But I was following you. I think you explained it super eloquently. I mean, you've probably been pitching this for a while now. So I just want to backtrack a bit so that I make sure I understand. So, okay, when you were talking about governments competing with each other, it sounds very akin to, the capitalist model between companies, right? But companies have a unity above them, which is governments that allow these incentives to allow companies to actually do something good for the world.
Exactly,
right? But
exactly.
The problem is
something good for the nation.
Because
the nation is the nation is to the companies what the world government would be to the nations.
True.
It's a mechanism to impose an incentive structure to cooperate.
Yeah, that's true. They put taxes, they create regulations, and I said global good, but it's the national good. That's why there's different regulations in different countries for the same company.
Which is not to say that this is always unaligned what's best for the global. Sometimes, and most of the times, even though we like to criticize capitalism, it creates win-win situations where everyone gets benefited, even though that's always not the time. So it's not always the case.
Okay, but of course the problem is that at some point there's no unit higher. Of course the natural thing would be to say let's put a central unit above governments that access the nation towards companies. But you're saying that there's a problem with that, which I understand.
Maybe we will reach it one day, but today it seems unattainable. If I can take a detour and show you the evolution of human societies, in our early days we would organize ourselves in little tribes, and in those times we didn't have central government that would place an incentive structure, so there was a lot of conflict. We were always fighting for food, fighting for limited resources, and there was a lot of blood spill until we managed to build small communities that were organized and where there were incentive structures, and we had like a small government and a small town, and this was the first time that we had a mechanism by which incentivized cooperation between individuals. The problem is that then we organized ourselves with little, we want to call it regions or towns. I mean, it was at different levels, different scales. But then you had a similar problem between communities. So you had different communities, and these different communities were at constant war. That's the period where you had a lot of wars, where every region or country were, declaring war on each other because of the same thing. They didn't have an incentive structure on top of them. And then we created sort of nations. But nation is a level higher in the hierarchy. But it's always been through a lot of misery and suffering that we've been able to, increase this
level of abstraction.
Exactly. Increase the level at which the incentives are placed. But I think it would happen. I mean, if we make it in the future a lot more years, we will develop something like it. Maybe it's not like I describe it now, but some form. If my solution is for some reason, not the best, which might very likely not be, but I'm sure there's no other way by which we can keep progressing as a society without attacking global problems, because global problems are one of the main challenges that we need to address. We can keep the best and our brightest engineers working on making our Uber arrive 30 seconds faster or our pizza 20 seconds faster. But we have to realize that even though I'm not criticizing this is amazing, those are marginal improvements, right? These are things that are making our lives better, but we're forgetting about things that really place an existential risk in our societies. I'm not saying that climate change has that might destroy our society, but there will be problems in the future that might destroy, maybe completely not completely destroy the human race, but really cause a catastrophic outcome. So we really require governments to cooperate between each other, because otherwise, something as nuclear energy could be, the end of civilization as we know it.
So while you were giving your initial explanation about the project, the idea of Nash Judge, I could see two challenges. There's probably more that you've yourself identified in the white paper, but I could see two, which is one. How do you make sure that the value of these tokens is competitive with the value of regular money right now, right? Yeah. And the other one is, so as far as I understand, these smart contracts have the huge responsibility of managing this flow of tokens, which in the end drives the value of these tokens. And so there's something in these smart contracts that is deciding what is good for the planet.
Like who is being cooperative.
Yes, who's being cooperative, and that seems like such a difficult algorithm to decide.
And even if you had a good algorithm, it's also an epistemology question. What do we really know? Do we really know if a country is cooperative? I'm going to be the first to admit that I'm talking about it as if it's something that you can quantify, but it's really difficult to quantify, because everyone will have different opinions on the nature of the ability of a country to cooperate. Yeah. So of course you can think that you can think of objective reality being there, but everyone interprets objective reality in a different way. Everyone perceives the world by a different lens. So everyone has a different perception, but also a different cognitive interpretation of what's happening. Yeah. So I'm not assuming that everyone will agree on what this cooperation metric is, but what we can do is some sort of law of large numbers, where when we ask this same question to a lot of people, then we combine the answers of everyone into a single metric. That I'm not implying that it's close to objective reality, but it's probably our best approximation that we can give to it. It's like when you ask citizens of a country to vote, everyone will be biased on the left or on the right or whatever spectrum you define. But what your hope is by combining the answers of everyone, you reach something that is actually useful. You use something that shows something about objective reality, even if you don't have access to it.
Okay, so how do you create a smart contract that basically, like, periodically you need to have these votes, right? Then of everyone on a global scale you need.
Yeah. So I didn't answer this. I offer a few solutions, but I guess what I would like to say before proposing a solution is that ideally what I would like to do is to inspire other people to offer solutions. I think I'm by no means close to being an expert on any of these topics. In fact, it's something that I learned on the fly while I was reading the paper. So I'm pretty sure that my solution is going to be one of the worst of the potential solutions to the problem. But you can think of different approaches, right? Like you can think, for example, of a voting system where you're asking people to vote on, do you think this country was cooperative? Do you think the invasion of this country on this other country is of a cooperative nature or of a defective nature? And again, people will disagree. Everyone have different opinions about anything. I'm not denying that. But by combining answers, you can arrive to something. Another approach is to well, to have some sort of it's similar to what representative democracies are. You have people that elect the people that are in charge, and then the people that are in charge that are experts, then they decide what are these metrics. But it's very difficult to design a system that has the right checks and balances, you know. It's very difficult to design a system that it's not corrupt, that, you know, it cannot be manipulated or anything, because of course if money is involved, people will try to exploit it. So there are different alternatives. One potential approach is to have like a completely data-driven approach. For example, this would work a little bit more when it comes to climate change. So instead of letting a human decide if a country is being cooperative, then just measure the amount of CO2 emissions of a government, or things that are more quantifiable, and then include all of this into a pipeline that at the end comes out with a metric. So,
yeah, I mean, that feels more straightforward, but then, you know, on a global level, you have to agree on these metrics and the weight of these metrics with respect to each other.
And another thing is that it doesn't have to be the case that there's only one token per country. You can have one token per country per problem, exactly. Okay. And then each of these will have a price that is correlated, you know. So we don't have to make it to weight the different, you know, things that we want to measure and combine them into one token. We can create tokens, one for CO2 emissions, another one for, you know, the peaceful nature of that country. Okay. You asked me another question.
Yes, the other question was how do the tokens themselves have a value large enough to actually tip the equation or the decision making?
This is something that I cannot prove. Like this is at the end of the day is a social contract, you know. Like things are valuable in a market not because a lot of times they have use value, but most of the time they have exchange value, which is that a thing is only valuable in a market because another person defines it as valuable. I give value to a paper bill, which
it's a shared belief, right?
Exactly, it's a shared belief, and ultimately this thing has value because, for example, like you can also say that money itself as an invention has value, or like monetary system, because it's a mechanism that allows us to first store value, then exchange value, and then account, like measure the value of things. So that's something that it's an invention. Money is an invention that is useful for humans. So at the end of the day, if something has a value to humans, then we can create a social contract, which is that something has value not in objective reality, but only as a product of human interaction, because it's able to solve a problem. And in this case, the problem would be global problems. But again, this is by no means a proof that, you know, it can reach a certain amount of value that it's enough to change the decision making of governments. Right. But it's the nature of saying this at the end of the day would be a social construct. I think I said social contract before. I meant a social construct, which is something, again, that it doesn't live in objective reality, it's just a product of human interaction. And if a thing is valuable, if an invention is valuable, at the end of the day, humans will perceive it as valuable. So as an investor, if I believe that this has the potential to change the world, if I believe that this can solve global problems, then I will probably think that the value will increase over time, that people will realize about this. And then, because I think that I'm going to invest now because the price will increase in the future. Whereas the opposite is also true. If I believe that this is definitely going to fail, then I'm going to sell it and the price is going to be lower. So at the end of the day, it drives down to the perception of people about this idea, if people are bullish or bearish.
Yeah. Okay.
But I should say,
one route is to convince investors.
Yeah, but I should say that there's a distinction, an important distinction here, that it's not a productive asset. Most assets are productive, meaning if you, for example, buy a company, this company is going to be productive, it's going to have some earnings, and by buying part of this company, you'll also be receiving part of the earnings of this company. But this is a non-productive asset, which means that owning these tokens doesn't give you more tokens. So that's the distinction here. It's, for example, you can think of a non-productive asset, or for example, money is a non-productive asset. Owning money doesn't give you more money. Like the literally owning a bill. I'm not saying owning the debt of other countries. So owning a bill or a bond. So there's a distinction there. It's like Bitcoin, for example, is also a non-productive asset. It doesn't give you more Bitcoins. So you only hold this kind of assets if you think that they're going to increase in value in the future.
Right. So I'm just thinking, like, I'm looking for an analogy, and I really don't know anything about this field, but in the process of globalization, there must have been moments where currencies had to mix, right? Like between countries. And we still have multiple different currencies, like many, many more than I can count. So how did they agree on a way of trading between each other? Do you know how?
You know the exchange rate from a dollar to a euro, or what?
Yeah.
So this is set by a market. There is a demand for dollars and a supply of dollars. The supply is normally controlled by central governments and also the private banking industry, and they control the supply of US dollars. So there's a supply of US dollars and there's a demand of US dollars. People want to buy US dollars to then sell products. So there's this supply and demand, and there's also a supply and demand of euros. So at the end of the day, there's a supply and a demand for each of these assets, and it's a market sets the exchange rate. So for example, now that the interest rates in the US are increasing, the demand of US dollars is increasing, and this means that US dollars are becoming more expensive relative to euros. And it's just the market that it's not that an algorithm is changing the price, it's just that people are willing to pay more euros for a dollar than before. So it's the free market that does that.
Okay. So so I want to understand, you were studying the same as me, we've both studied aerospace, then we did robotics. How was this idea born? Where did this come from, and you mentioned that you learned most of it while researching this idea further, but how was it born, and why did you decide?
Yeah, to be honest, I couldn't pinpoint the place where the idea came, but I've always been a little bit interested. I've taken a few open courseware courses on economics, microeconomics, macroeconomics, also a lot of game theory I studied. I also learned about blockchain technology and different, I programmed a few smart contracts and tried to understand how this technology works. So I had sort of like the very elementary basics on each of the main pieces of the puzzle. But then the idea itself, I couldn't pinpoint where it came, but I sort of remember where the inspiration came.
Okay.
And I remember I was on a flight. I was flying from San Francisco to Boston, and I was listening to the soundtrack of a movie called Munich, The Edge of War. And it's a movie that depicts the period in which Chamberlain was ruling in the UK prior to World War II, and he was desperately trying to prevent war from happening. And there's a scene of them. I was listening to the soundtrack, and it reminded me to a scene of the movie where Chamberlain is in his garden and he tells his wife, "I would gladly stand against this wall and be shot if that prevented war from happening." So he was trying to desperately prevent war from happening, a global problem from happening, but he didn't find the solution. And, it's not that this made me realize of the solution, but I was really trying to think, why do wars happening? From a game theory standpoint, why does it really happen? I know already, I've studied game theory and I know why it happens, but I was trying to think, given that this happens and that it is definitely a game theory problem, how do we, if it's just a game theory problem, if it wasn't because of the game theory aspect, we could solve that problem, right? So why is it really that we have this problem? And since that, I sort of investigated, maybe what we need is an incentive structure. And then I learned a bit about how blockchain technology can help into that, but yeah.
So currently, I think due to your thesis, you've kind of put this project on hold, right? So as far as I know, you wrote the white paper, you sent it to a bunch of different people that you knew and also people that you didn't know. Then you published the video. And I'm wondering what's currently the status. Are you planning on continuing to work on it, or what? Yeah,
so I think I will continue to work on it as a side project, as the many more side projects that I've had before. I don't want to make it my main work first and foremost because I'm not an expert, but also I don't have the time or resources to commit to it fully. But my intention with it initially was to just spread out the word and let others do whatever they want to do with the project, and try to contact professors that are experts in the topic, or in general experts. And I've done a little bit of that, but I definitely what my next steps are gonna be are just to contact with experts on the field, first to give me feedback, because I'm sure that there are a lot of things that have to be addressed, and second to encourage them to do the same, right? To spread the word and probably to actually put this into practice and create the tokens in a blockchain, and distribute them on a population that can demand or that can buy or sell these tokens, so that they can be valued on a market. So all of these things.
So how would you, because I guess something that would be really useful to show the power is to do a pilot project that is at a smaller scale, right? So how can this be done?
Actually, I mean, you asked a very important question on, the mechanism that we use to establish the cooperation score of countries. That per se would be a very challenging project. Assuming that you have this metric is actually a very easy problem. And I myself, I have programmed sort of versions of this on, blockchain programming language. I deployed one on a fake version of Ethereum where it sort of works. But it's not only the programming side of it. It's like, for example, you have to have an initial supply in terms of you need someone to own these tokens and to provide some liquidity so that they can sell and buy these tokens. And the way that you spread these tokens in the beginning is very difficult, because I could say, okay, I get to have all of the supply of tokens, as the creator of it. But then really, if there's only one person with this supply, how do you establish the price? Because it's not that you have people selling and buying these tokens. Plus, it would be very unfair that one person has all of the supply. Then I can say, okay, I can let people buy these tokens if they demand the tokens, but right now no one knows about the project. Another more ethical approach would be it's what's called airdropping these tokens, which is to just sort of, you can imagine the picture of deploying tokens from the sky to random people. This would be a more egalitarian way to distribute the tokens, but you want people that receive these tokens to, they have to have an address, right? They have to have a private public key that has they have to understand how blockchain works and all this. So it's not straightforward, It's not as easy as saying, okay, I create this algorithm that drops tokens from the sky. I think having an helicopter that would do that would be easier, actually. That drops pen drives from the sky that have the private public keys that you need to buy and sell these tokens.
So we've reached my favorite part of the podcast, which are intuition-based questions. And I know you'll enjoy this part as well, because you actually have a podcast, right, called Nomads, where you discuss some of these fundamental existential questions. So I think you enjoy thinking about this. So does artificial intelligence worry or excite you? Which one more?
Definitely. Both, I would say.
Yes.
I mean, in my personal life, in my intellectual curiosity, it excites me.
Yes.
Do I think that it's gonna have net positive or net negative impacts? I would approach it as a probabilistic question. I don't know about the probabilities, but I know that if something is to bring humanity to a better level, is AI, and if something is to bring humanity to a worse level, is also AI. It's gonna. I'm talking about artificial general intelligence, not about improving the current state of AI. So something that it's really game changing and that it can solve problems on a different domain of topics and to a much greater extent to which humans can do today's. So it would definitely change the nature of jobs. What should we dedicate our lives to if the service that we can provide to society, as in the products and services we build, is not required because we have robots and AIs that can do it much better than ourselves. We'd have to change the economic systems, we would have to change the ways in which organize society and all those things. But I'm definitely worried about the potential negative outcomes of it. So I love technology, as I told you, I'm very passionate about it, but that doesn't make me a person that is always positive about technologies. I think they are very powerful tools, both for the good and for the bad. So the same tool can be used for the good or for the bad. We've seen that with so many tools, with nuclear energy, with social media, and so many more. So that brings me to the Nash topic again. Sorry to plug it again, but that's why it's so important to have good incentive structures, because the effects of a technology are not so much on the technology itself, but the use that we make of it. So the way we align the incentives of the people that use this technology with the common good. So we want to make sure that whoever is using this technology in the future has incentives that are aligned with the common good.
So what is your explanation for Fermi's paradox?
So the reason why I've heard so many answers to this, and of course I'm not making them myself. So it can be that first, whenever an intelligent society becomes very developed, as I was saying before, its ability to auto-destruct themselves, or maybe not auto-destruct, but bring themselves to a different form of life that it's not materialistic, then this implies that whenever a civilization is very intelligent, then it sort of disappears from the materialistic universe, and this is why we haven't seen that. So you can think of it as the big filter, that every time a civilization becomes very intelligent, then they go through this filter and they disappear, and that's why we haven't encountered this.
So auto-destruction.
Auto-destruction could be one. Another one could be that the universe is so big and so large in space and in time, that if you think about this very high dimensional space, it's like there might exist many more civilizations, but they are so far that even if they are trying to reach us, we haven't yet received their signals. And another one can be that they could be so much more intelligent that for us we're not cognitively adapted to perceive their signals. So maybe they are just right here, right now. But it's the same way that if I wave to an ant, if I wave to an ant, my three-dimensional understanding of the world, I know what I'm doing, I'm waving to an ant, but the ant doesn't know what's going on. She's just wandering around, and she observe a disturbance above her or something, but she doesn't interpret. She probably, maybe she does. I'm not who to say. Maybe she knows I'm a human, but maybe it's just a disturbance in space that she doesn't know how to interpret. So that the same thing could be applying to us. There's so many theories there. I don't want to list them all.
I was just thinking of one which I haven't actually heard before. So when you were talking about the threshold, the threshold of intelligence, reaching a point where you can auto-destruct yourself, I was thinking of it like you reach a point of intelligence and technological maturity where you can create a metaverse that does not... You basically don't want to live in reality anymore.
Yeah, exactly. You convert yourself to information processing, basically. So you don't live in the materialistic world, or maybe you live in a materialistic world, but your consciousness is rendered in a non-materialistic world.
Essentially, you live in a world that you perceive as much better than the real one, so a digital world, and you have no interest in continuing to explore the universe at that point. And with things happening around the metaverse now,
or it could be that the desire to explore is something that you experience only up until a certain level of intelligence, and there, as you said, you're then chilling in the pocket of space and time at which you find yourself in the universe, but you don't go on to explore other spaces.
It could be that everyone else has figured out that this universe sucks and that they can create much better ones for themselves. And I guess exploit their biological systems that they embody. I don't know.
I don't think we're cognitively adapted to imagine all of the reasons why we haven't encountered these things.
What would you say is the coolest robot or artificial intelligence on Earth?
AI, it goes so fast. Every week I'm going to change. Now I'm going to say I'm struggling between Copilot and DALL-E 2.
Okay.
So should I describe them briefly?
Yeah. Maybe
so Copilot is this very, it's one of these exciting but things that I'm fearful, that I'm afraid about. So Copilot is a tool that you can use that suggests you code, basically. So you write a prompt, which, for example, says write a function that does this and that, and then it auto-generates the code. So it's something that it's very exciting, but it's probably gonna take my job in a few years. But it's again, from a personal standpoint, it's amazing to see that, like from an intellectual curiosity standpoint, it's just mind-blowing that this works. I'm not saying that it has positive benefits. And the second one is DALL-E 2. That I know you got access to, right, as well. That basically you give a prompt, for example, say draw an image of a guitar that is being played by an avocado, and then it generates this image. So you can literally write whatever you want, and you're gonna obtain an image that is based on this prompt. So that's also fascinating.
So, if you were given $1 million, or it could be 1 billion or 100 million, an insane amount that could actually make an impact, but you could only invest it in things that you're not involved with. So not in yourself, not in a company you're affiliated with.
And that is not gonna impact my life in any way, only the life of others.
Well, that goes very far.
Okay.
Because there are companies with a mission that touch almost everyone's life. So what projects or things would you invest in, do you think?
So actually, that's an ideal question, because I very recently wrote about this branch of philosophy called effective altruism, and it tells you what is the most effective way that you can spend your money in a way that impacts the lives of others, but from a purely rational perspective. Like you don't care about making something that looks very beautiful and seems to be very heroic, but something that actually works. So for example, donating to cancer sounds very good, but if you donate to malaria research, the per unit of dollar spent, you can affect the lives of so many more people, because malaria is not as researched like as cancer is, because it's in underdeveloped countries, whereas cancer is in developed countries. Or for example, if you want to donate to a pet shelter, then you again, nothing against that. This is really cool that you're doing that. But it turns out that if what you want is to reduce human suffering, then donating for anti-farming campaigns actually is not that it has a better, like a more effective outcome by a factor of 2. It's that it has an effective outcome by a factor of 100. Like our intuitions there are so wrong. So of course the research has to improve, and it's constantly changing. But I would probably not try to think about this myself, but go into the research and see, what is the best way to donate or invest money such that it has a positive impact on others. And I'm not claiming that these researchers know, this is something that everyone has to continue evolving.
Okay, I guess the key questions, though, even if you go into this research, is what is the impact? How are you quantifying that? And in what time horizon?
Exactly, right? That's
because
very.
If you say my impact is a number of lives that I save with this amount of money, in how many years? Because if it's in many years, if that horizon is like suddenly 500 years, then maybe you better start caring more about climate change or more catastrophic events, and then your metric becomes how many trees can I plant or how many.
That's a very good question. What is the discount factor that we should use? So do you care more about people that exist, few people that exist right now, or by a lot of people that have the potential to exist in the future? I don't know, and I don't think a researcher can know about that. And still, of course they try to quantify these things, but one thing you can imagine is that our intuition could be very wrong from what's actually true. In that, for example, I believe that animal farming is really, it causes a lot of suffering in animals. because for some reason I think that animals are sentient and they have they experience positive and negative states of consciousness. But maybe that's not the case. Maybe there's a random possibility that it's actually not the case. And in this case, actually consuming meat would preventing the consumption of meat would be detrimental, because this would prevent us from, at least from animal suffering standpoint. CO2 emissions is another topic, but from this standpoint would actually be a good thing that we eat meat, because we're increasing the amount of pleasure in our bodies per se. Or maybe it turns out that the most sentient objects in the universe is grass. And then if we kill cows, well, that's actually good because cows eat grass. So, things that I don't believe these things to be true, by the way. Sorry, I don't want to spread conspiracy theories. But it could be that our intuition about what's good and bad ultimately is very far from the truth. So you have to take everything, of course, with a grain of salt. Yeah. And at the end, probably you want to look it under your own understanding.
So I can see that you have an entrepreneurial mindset from the many projects that you've started, especially like Nash Judge and the other project called Your Mark, right?
Yeah.
So is this something that you see yourself doing in the future? Like, do you see yourself becoming or being an entrepreneur or starting your own thing?
I consider the possibility of it, definitely, because I know that I really like to put ideas into practice, and I think that I should exploit this. But it's not that I want to commit myself to one path. Ideally I would want to live a life in which I can do whatever I want. If I want to have a stable job that allows me to not care too much about work, then I will go on that path. And if what I want is just the rush of it, I want to really have my project and make it from scratch and make it have an impact in the world, then I want to be able to do that. Right now, I don't know. I just I want to wait until I see what's best for me in the future. But for example, I want to keep aside some part of the income that I generate in these next years, because I know that there's a high chance that at some point I will be involved in a project like this, and I want to invest in my own company in the future. So I'm already thinking about this right now, even though I don't have the idea in mind.
What aspects of a company in the future are you less experienced in?
If I can share something about Your Mark, which is this social networking site to have donations to nonprofits, I put so much effort into the programming side of it. I developed this mobile app and then this web app, and I spent more time than I was spending at uni. It was an insane amount of time because I was learning on the fly. And I thought that I was gonna change the world. I thought, oh, this is amazing. I was really proud of it. But little did I know that the programming side of it is only the tip of the iceberg. You need, like in my case, for example, I obviously need a legal team that would handle, donations, because you have to make, tax-exempt donations, and you have to give certificates of that, and you have to manage different currencies, and donations work differently in different countries, and you want to contact NGOs so that they put their information in your platform. You want marketing because you want users to know about your idea, and there's so many things. Of course, I just mentioned the second tip of the iceberg, but at the time I thought, oh, I've made it, this is enough. Publish, deploy.
We're waiting for all the downloads to come.
Exactly. So I mean, it's obvious. I don't need to explain why that didn't work. But yeah.
Okay, so that was a big lesson.
Yeah, underestimate even if there's a domain that you're not passionate about, or you don't understand the value of it. Like, for example, a lot of times I struggle to understand, why do we have marketing? People would buy the same products with or without marketing, but then you run a company without marketing and see where it goes. So you have to understand that every component is essential, I guess.
All right. Well, with that, we can finish this very longest episode, I think. Of the podcast so far, but it's been awesome, honestly, to have this final deep, long, calm conversation without a rush. before you head out to San Francisco, because we've been living in this house that we're in right now for the past year, and man, I don't know when I'll see you again.
Yeah, I mean, I hope to come back soon, but yeah, definitely thank you first for being my housemate, but then for inviting me, and yeah, the conversation was very, very fun.
If you've enjoyed this episode, please follow or subscribe to the show on whatever platform you use. And don't forget to share this podcast with anyone interested in entrepreneurship, university student life, and the rising minds and technologies of the future before they change the world.